Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the striking literary contrasts hidden inside Esther chapter 8. Now, if you've been following the story of Esther, you know we've just witnessed a massive reversal of fortunes. Haman's evil plot has been completely foiled. But we're about to discover a really profound tension hidden deep in the text. What actually happens when a promise is made, but the ultimate fulfillment of that promise hasn't happened yet? The enemy has fallen, sure, but as we're going to see, the story is far from over.
Okay, let's dive right into this massive paradox at the start of the chapter. At this point in the narrative, the great enemy, Haman, has been executed, and ironically, he was executed on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. His sprawling estate has been handed over to Queen Esther, and Mordecai just got a huge promotion. Yet, despite all these incredible victories, our hero, Queen Esther, is still crying at the king's feet. So why? Well, because while the architect of the destruction is gone, his deadly machine is still running at full speed.
The crucial thing you have to understand here is that even though Haman is dead, his legally binding death sentence on the Jewish people cannot just be erased. According to the strict laws of the Medes and Persians, a decree sealed with the king's signet ring, it cannot be revoked by anyone, period. Think of it like the worst bureaucratic red tape imaginable. The guy who created the destruction is in the grave, but his paperwork is still actively processing. It's a lingering sword of Damocles hanging right over the heads of the Jewish people across 127 provinces.
All right, that brings us to Section 1, the lingering deadly threat.
We're looking at the terrifying reality of a threat that outlives its creator. You see, the real problem the author of Esther wants us to focus on here isn't just Haman as an individual, but how God's people can actually be saved from this unchangeable, systemic Persian law. Haman might be out of the picture, but his royal decree is still traveling along the ancient highways, moving ruthlessly through the vast empire.
And this timeline perfectly illustrates the tension. Haman's decree originally went out way back in the first month. Right now, in the present moment of chapter 8, the Jewish people are living in this incredibly tense middle ground. They are waiting for the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, to arrive, because that is the exact day the royal decree authorized their enemies to execute their absolute annihilation. The clock is literally ticking, and the date is set in stone.
Moving on to Section 2, A Tale of Two Decrees.
So, how do you solve a completely impossible legal problem? Well, the writer uses this absolutely stunning literary trick. They intentionally force us to compare a brand new decree of salvation directly with Haman's original decree of destruction. If the author just wanted to quickly say, hey, the king issued a new law to save everyone, they could have just done that in one brief sentence. But instead, they choose to repeat the structural narrative of the first decree almost word for word.
Think about it. The exact same bureaucratic machinery from chapter 3 is completely reused in chapter 8. First, the king's scribes are summoned. Then the decree is carefully translated and written out in the local languages and scripts of every single province. Next, it's officially sealed with the king's signet ring. And finally, it gets dispatched by urgent couriers riding these royal fleet-footed horses. It is a precise, deliberate mirror image of the original nightmare.
Which brings us to Section 3, the shift in power.
This repetition we just talked about, it builds into a massive shift. When you really stop and look at these events side by side, you realize that the environment, the bureaucratic systems, and the strict laws haven't changed one single bit. The only thing that has changed is the person who holds the power to dictate the terms. In chapter 3, the scribes wrote according to Haman's command. In chapter 8, they're writing according to Mordecai's command. It's the same scribes, the same ink, the same empire, but a completely different boss dictating the terms. This is the ultimate turning point of the narrative. The king takes off his signet ring, the exact same ring that brought a horrific sentence of death and destruction when Haman wore it, and it's now being used to bring this beautiful message of salvation when placed on the hand of Mordecai. The physical object is exactly the same, but the authority wielding it is entirely different.
It's just a fantastic reminder that sometimes God orchestrates a rescue, not by destroying a broken system, but by changing who holds the authority within it. He is working entirely within the unchanged, rigid environment of the Persian legal code to orchestrate a miraculous rescue. The environment is exactly the same, but the authority, it has entirely shifted.
Let's jump into Section 4, Sorrow Turned to Joy.
This shift in authority creates an incredible ripple effect all across the empire.
The new decree doesn't, and actually legally cannot, cancel the old one. Instead, Mordecai's decree explicitly grants the Jewish people the royal, legal right to assemble together to heavily defend their lives and to destroy any armed force that might attempt to attack them. It essentially provides the ultimate legal countermeasure they need to survive the coming 12th month.
The author beautifully closes the narrative loop here by contrasting the atmosphere in the capital city. Back in chapter 3, right after Haman's terrible decree, the city of Susa was left in absolute bewilderment, grief, and total chaos. But now, in chapter 8, as Mordecai emerges from the king's presence wearing stunning blue and white royal robes and a massive crown of gold, the city of Susa erupts. It's just ecstatic joy, cheers, and massive celebration. The contrast is literally night and day.
Honestly, this is probably the most beautiful, emotionally resonant turning point in the entire book of Esther. We see that God's salvation doesn't just alter political situations on paper, it completely transforms the deeply personal, inner emotional lives of his people. That incredibly heavy burden of fear and despair, it's instantly replaced with immense joy and radiant hope. And keep in mind, this joy happens even though the physical battle hasn't actually taken place yet.
And what's really wild about this is that the transformation is so visible, so undeniably powerful, and so radiant that the surrounding nations are irresistibly drawn to it. The text actually makes a point to note that many people of other nationalities changed their own identities to become Jews. The profound awe of what God was doing for this people was so compelling, so incredibly obvious, that outsiders desperately wanted to be a part of it.
And that brings us to section 5. The ultimate takeaway.
So, let's bridge this ancient Persian history right into our modern lives. Think about exactly where the Jewish people are at the end of chapter 8. They are rejoicing, feasting, and celebrating in the streets. But remember, they're still waiting for the 13th day of the 12th month. They have the royal, unbreakable promise of salvation right there in their hands, but they haven't actually fought the physical battle yet. The imminent danger is technically still on the horizon.
This structured timeline perfectly outlines a major theological concept widely known as the already but not yet. Step 1. God's people have the decree. The promise of salvation is already officially issued and legally binding. Step 2. They are currently living in the waiting period, holding fiercely on to that present reality. And step 3. They are looking forward to the final battle, where that ultimate victory will be fully and permanently realized.
Just like the Jews in Susa who knew the ultimate end of the story but still had to live and wait inside the hostile Persian Empire, modern believers live in a very similar tension. We have already received the ultimate promise of victory over sin and death through Jesus' grace. Yet we still constantly navigate a present reality full of difficult challenges, broken systems, and daily battles in a world that can often be pretty hostile to that very truth.
The deep comfort of Esther chapter 8 isn't that God just waves a magic wand and makes all earthly problems vanish instantly into thin air. The real comfort is knowing that once God sets his plan of salvation into motion, the final victory is absolutely guaranteed. He has begun the beautiful work, and just like that Persian signet ring, the royal decree is sealed forever.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty big question to ponder. When you find yourself sitting in the waiting period, when the empire all around you hasn't changed one bit, when the systems you're dealing with are still broken, and the actual battle is still lying ahead of you, where do you find your peace? What does your faith actually rest upon? Because ultimately, true peace comes not from a perfect, stress-free environment, but from trusting the one who holds the ultimate authority over the outcome. Just as Mordecai held the king's signet ring, we trust in a higher authority whose promise of salvation is already written, already permanently sealed, and entirely unbreakable. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking for those profound truths hidden in the details.